This is James Casey, who is he's the director of the associate director of the Virginia Serious Games Institution at George Mason University. It's one of the places where gaming is not only taken seriously, but used to implement and apply critical thinking, problem solving, and the identification, and it's an outreach arm for the computer game design program at George Mason University. He engages and mentors with many of his students and incubates companies at the VSGI.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Hey, no problem. Glad to be here.
As you know, we are part of the National Science Foundation Convergence Accelerator Award,
Yep.
and we're looking at quantum literacy, and the concepts that can be used and the resources to communicate quantum concepts, quantum processes, and just an appreciation for its impact on our everyday life.
Sure.
However, one of the resources that's often used to support learning is gaming.
Oh, big advocate here.
Well, I am, and my granddaughters are as well. They have advocated that gaming be used for the quantum. And I know it's used for problem solving and for critical thinking and creativity, and even for teamwork. But quantum is a difficult concept to visualize.
Sure.
How then, if you're designing in a digital world, the two or three concepts that I would worry about communicating and transmitting or overcoming would be creating an environment to which the students could relate.
Sure.
Keeping it fun.
Yep.
And at the same time communicating these vague concepts, visualizing them, and ensuring they understand that the underlying concept is that probability.
Oh, yeah.
So how would you overcome that small hill?
Big question, right? Yeah. I mean, it kind of boils down to the same thing when you start to look at serious games and how they're used and how they can supplement learning, complement learning, all that type of language, right? It really boils down to, like, how would you teach this anyways, right? Like, if you think about how quantum computing and quantum mechanics and all this stuff works, at the end of it, you have to think, how would I just tell somebody this?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how do I communicate to someone the core concepts of quantum mechanics or computing? And, like, what is the logic and these things, and these and ors and ifs and all these crazy logic, right? And you do the same thing for almost any topic. It's like building a curriculum. So at the starting point, you have to figure out, what do we need them to learn?
Mm-hmm.
Then we figure out, how do we take those concepts and we figure out how to marry them with other concepts. So it's like, so if we've got, logic gates and,
Mm-hmm.
And there's and, or, and if, and, these,
right.
Like, so you get this, and then if this comes to
the conditioners.
this, right,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. It's like, how do we take that and put it into a game mechanic that would be fun? And so you think about, like, where are decisions made in games? And how could we make those decisions dependent upon those things? So you think about classic games, always had, like, block puzzles, for example.
Yes.
Off the top of my head, right? Like,
right.
You got to move a block over here, and that does a switch, and it opens a door. What if you take that concept and you marry it with this idea of these gates? And it's like, so now, based on the color of the blocks and where I put them, I'll get different actions that will take place, and they mirror basically the quantum mechanics, the probabilities, and all things like that. So by taking this concept and putting it into a tangible form, maybe moving blocks around so you can open a gate and go to the next thing, and you start to see how this cascades and how over time it makes it much more efficient and all the things that quantum brings to the table. But you're doing it in a way that abstracts it somewhat, keeps it within a fun realm, which is what people are looking for. And once they're engaged, then they really start to follow that logic, and then they start to apply it to other things, and then they can take that knowledge and apply it to other things, building the quantum computers and all the things that the future brings. And so we do this with tons of concepts, whether it's AI, machine learning, other things that,
So you're using it for that as well?
Yeah, we do games for pretty much anything. I mean, we've done some crazy type stuff. We worked with FEMA, for example, on some research where they wanted to talk about flood insurance because it's one of their big things, and it's very flood comes in, there's a lot of damage. If you don't have flood insurance, or you don't know how to even if it happens and you have insurance, how to handle it and who to go to, and all these preparation, etc. And so one of the things we worked with them is like, how do you use games as an engagement method, as an outreach method? And so we actually, we came up with ideas. And again, it's how do we make this concept applicable to other people? How do we, is it a SimCity like game? Is it like, so you start to think about like, how do we make this married to game concepts that people will find fun so that they learn by osmosis or whatever you want to call it, right? And once they're engaged, they just start learning. So like you think about Minecraft or Roblox these days, those are these building blocks of a game. And so you could take the concept of quantum, put it into that, and all of a sudden, they're already interested in those. And now you're giving them ways to create new content, new concepts, new fun stuff, share it with other people, and they're almost teaching each other.
Okay. So, for instance, if I was trying to, one of the easier probably to do would be analogous to the bird migration. Something that's in nature would probably be the easiest to emulate.
Yeah.
So if you had something that articulated the bird's ability to communicate with the Earth's magnetic field, giving them their instructions, basically, to always migrate to the same location.
I mean, it's the same idea. It's like, so when you think about games, right? Games have this idea of mini maps, because you have to give information to players in a game, for example. There are almost like senses that you have that you don't normally have. So like, like Spider-Man has his danger sense, right? Like you're playing a game, if something's coming from you from the side, not everybody has surround sound so they can hear it.
Right.
So you usually see visual indicators of sound and things like that. So yeah, if they were flying or they were doing something or even playing a bird or, analogous, they were in a spaceship that had special sensors and they're like, oh, we're following this. And it's like, hey, over here is where you're supposed, like, oh, okay, so that's the magnetic field. And then you start to get the people in and they can kind of guide it. And so really that's all it is. It's just translating into something that visually they can understand and have fun with. And so that concept gets into their head and then you start to apply it more places and they start to naturally understand it and hopefully seek out more information on it.
Right, that would be my concern. And again, when you've got the use that it's in their everyday lives already. It's just the underlying concepts themselves when they, but that's teaching it. How then do we nurture their creativity to advance the field?
Yeah, that's a potential conundrum for anything, right? Like it's the same thing with teachers, right? Like once you teach them math and once you teach them English, like how do you nurture that passion? And I think the one thing that's nice about games is, typically speaking, even if they have fun with a game, they're not going to give up on games, right? It's something that they like to do and they'll find other games. But if you instill this concept in there and they're using the game and they're going to constantly be reminded of it and they're constantly using those mechanics, then they can start to apply it in other ways. And I think what you have to do is, at that point, offer additional content, additional outreach to them to say, hey, look, you know what, you've mastered all these things. Why don't you come over here and try this out? And we'll take what you've learned and love and we'll do new stuff with it. And so it's a combination of a little bit of, hopefully guiding them to self-learning at some point, because you have to let the kids go at some point, right? Or even adults, and providing them a path, right? Because if you just say, hey, look, we taught you 1 + 1 is equal to 2, I'm pretty sure you can figure out the rest. Okay.
So we need a little help there.
I mean, we've all seen the internet memes where it's like, do this equation and everybody gets it wrong because so order of operations and all that stuff.
Oh dear Lord, yes.
Yeah.
The premise or something, yes.
At some point you gotta set them free, but you also have to
give them some guidance there. Okay. Yeah. I have to ask, how did you get into gaming?
Sure. So my parents I don't know why. But you know, I didn't ask them at the time, obviously. But they were good enough to recognize that computers were interesting, a thing that could lead to other things, right? And so when I was young, we had I think it was like a TI 994A, which is to this day and age like way less power than most people's phones, probably even flip phones. But it was a computer, and you could type in code to make programs run and play games. You had cassettes that you could load, and it would load the game on it.
Yeah.
It had cartridges at the time, I believe, was the main way, and they were all really bad games if you look at them now. But back then, that was all there was, right? And then, of course, they got the Atari 2600, and so.
Oh, I remember when that came out.
Yeah, so as a kid, I got exposure to them through my parents, and of course, they were fun, they were enjoyable. It was just a way to pass time. But over time, I just kept at it. It was a hobby that stuck with me, like reading books or comics or whatever it is that I liked. I kept with it, and then I got into making games because after I got my master's in business, I went on and did some management and retail stuff, and it was just not for me. And there was a local game company that was hiring, and I decided to apply as, at that time, customer service, which was part-time. It was a supplement just for fun. It's like, gaming, why not? It's like, I like games, why not just see how it is? And I really liked it, so I went full-time and then moved up and up and up and up. And then, 12 plus years went by, and then they moved the studio, and I didn't want to go to Prince Edward Island, Canada, so I decided to stay here and teach and help run the Serious Game Institute. So that's
neat. That's very neat. In a way, I guess that's going to be analogous to some of the people in the quantum career field right now, because it's not structured, and it's going to be those who are in the either a parallel or an analogous that can, with some reskilling, they can get into it.
Because quantum, sure, it's been around for a while, but like with the achievements that they've had recently, it's really starting to now become something that you can do and more people can achieve. But back when it was theoretical, there was less people in it.
Yeah.
But the logic there and the things that were being theorized existed. There weren't as many people. Now we can actually seek out kids and teach them this, and they can become the next folks in the field. And hopefully through games or whatever, it just develops into an interest that they keep, and maybe it'll evolve into something new, and it'll be some new
career that's just going to go that, and it will.
When the robots take over.
That's right. Hey, listen. According to my granddaughters, yes, they will. They will. Okay. I again, thank you very much for doing this. Anytime. We appreciate it. Yep. I will admit I do feel a little bit better about communicating and transmitting the concept of this vagueness, of this probability of tunneling, entanglement, superpositioning, all of these terms in an everydayness of work for someone, and them being able to build a career path.
And the nice thing too is like when you think about it, like all those terms you said, they're not like new,
right?
But they've been in popular media. Like you ever watch Star Trek, you've heard all those terms, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So by putting them into places that people will hear them, in science fiction and games and things like that, you're basically building that interest so that they want to learn more. And then when you actually get to actually play with it, like, oh, well, how does this entanglement or these types of things work within this game environment? It's like, okay. And then hopefully that prods them further.
To go them further, Okay. Well, thank you very much, sir.
Anytime.